let's look at what these guys tried to deliver. It was this architecture impact thing. It was fairly easy to define what was in it. So that was the good part. And that's the good thing about documents that you have to deliver. You can usually get a copy of an old one and go, aha, it's got this in it, it's got that, it's got a list of these, it's got some funny chatty bits about something else, it's got a funny diagram, but at least you've got a concrete example to go on. We'll look later on at areas where that isn't really true. And all this document was doing was saying, if I make this change in the business that I'm proposing, here's its effect on the architecture, because they were trying to drive the architecture in a particular direction to go mostly cloud-based and off-site, multi-site use, and that kind of stuff. So this was good. This was good. The CTO said, well, okay, you're not. Oh, I've got those ticks and crosses in the wrong order. I've just noticed that. It wasn't giving him his deep insights, but it was showing progress. So in your mind, reverse those two round. The stakeholder community were good. They're saying, right, finally, with my architecture impact, you're giving me something concrete which fits in my process, so I don't have to go and change my world. Okay, so now time to dive into this architecture impact thing and figure out what is it we want to deliver and how. So I'll split this into 3 bits then: the what, the how, and the where. So what do they need? What's inside it? What are the individual sort of moving parts and bits and pieces? How we can deliver it, the mechanism, and where in the model I'm going to find it, or where I'm going to have to go and harvest it from the outside. So the top bit is kind of the easy bit in any if you're analyzing a document, because it just says, hey, you get the document, you take it apart, and then you figure out that this is a list of those, and you can show how this relates to that. It's actually pretty straight. It's just data modeling. And those of you who are very old will remember being given a paper form and analyzing that form by going, oh, well, that's a customer, and then that's an address. An address is different from a customer, and then they had a telephone number and an account number, and you took all that information from that form and you made it into a data model. I was about to say, hands up those who have done that, but you're all out there. So that's a pretty well understood process. It's data modeling, and lots of people know how to do it. And we'll come back to that in a second when we look at modeling. So that part, if it's a document that you have to deliver, actually isn't so bad. It's a well-bounded, well understood problem. You take the document apart and make a data model out of it, and that says, hey, that's what my model needs to contain. Life is not like that, I'm afraid. There is a spectrum of deliverables, from the solid, definite ones at the left-hand side here to the really fuzzy ones at the right-hand side. It just so happened in this case that we picked something for at this end, the definite document stuff, which is good because it's easy to define. Often needs an awful lot of data to make it work. So we were a bit shocked when we looked at our architecture impact document, just how much information needed to go into it. When you looked at each individual heading and each individual column in a table, that was a lot of information. But hey ho, that's the job. May have lots of consumers of that. The outputs, though, at least are simpler. You produce the document, you compare the document you've got out of Enterprise Architect with the document you had before and go, yeah, they're the same. And therefore, I think if you can pick these early on, as these guys did, the risk is lower. There's a really good chance that if you put the right information into the model, you generate a document that looks half decent, that will be acceptable. So you have a pretty low risk way of doing things. At the other end of this scale is the fuzzy priority, opportunity, kind of what should I do next? What does the world look like stuff, which was what the CTO was expecting, and why he was a bit frustrated as to that actually we started down this end where I thought we could have had much better chance of being successful. So he wanted this fuzzy stuff up here, And the problem with that fuzzy stuff is it is hugely open-ended. It's very, very difficult to define. Lots and lots of data, just like the other stuff, relatively few consumers. I'm not sure that's a benefit or a drawback, but they don't know what they want, and they certainly don't know how they want it delivered. Is it a pie chart? Is it some kind of heat map? Is it one of those fantastic charts that Collaborate draws? They don't know. They might know it when they see it, but they certainly won't be able to tell you what it is in advance. So that makes these things really hard to nail down. But I would suggest the business value of this is probably way higher than an individual document that's produced at the other end of the scale. Because here you are going back to very senior people and saying, look, this model thing that we've been doing, it can tell you which bits of your application portfolio should be retired, which bits are best left where they are, and which bits you can put into the cloud, and start understanding risk and project dependencies and things like this. So really high value stuff, if only you can get the data and the knowledge into the model that lets you deliver them. So difficult to know where to start. I would say, if it was me, and much as my advice to this team was, start down this end and be successful. There's a great presentation that Peter Lieber does from Lieber in Austria, where he looks at how to be successful in EA, and it absolutely backs this up, or I back up what Peter says, which is do a little bit and be successful. Don't try and do everything, because if you fail, that says that doing enterprise architecture is clearly bad, which it isn't. It just means we didn't execute very well. So do a bit, be successful, do a bit more, be more successful, and so on. And eventually you'll begin to be able to deliver this sort of insight stuff as you're going along. And your user community for this will be very frustrated because it won't all arrive together. But that's just how it is. You know, that's nothing really we can do about that. So that's thinking about the kind of thing we're trying to deliver. Now let's think about how to deliver it. And I'm sure this bit is going to be familiar to more of you. There's a whole, again, a range of different options that we might think about. Far left-hand side over here, which people still try every now and the results are pretty much uniformly the same. It's, we've got this great tool and it's got lots of great information in it, so I'll just get you get it installed on your desktop and you can have access to it. And the new user opens it up and goes, what on earth is all this? Diagrams and packages and bits, what am I looking at? And they might look at it for 5 minutes and go, too hard, much too hard. There's a variation of that we'll come into a bit later on, because it may be that you want to make these people into modelers. That's why you're giving them access. And if you do that, there are some tricks we can look at in a second that says, don't just give them the model and run away. Be nice, be kind to them and give them some ways of getting into the model and understanding it and exploring in a more structured way. So if you do want to pull them into your modeling world, there are some ways that we can think of to do that. But usually, for the majority of stakeholders who will never be modelers, it is a bad idea just to give them model access. What they probably want is at the other end of the scale. They want this funky stuff that Collaborate does for them. And it's ever since Collaborate's been invented, which is not that many years ago now, you show these kind of diagrams to people and say, this has all come out of Enterprise Architect. The statement is always, I didn't know Enterprise Architect could do that. And the answer is, well, it doesn't. It's Collaborate pulling things out of Enterprise Architect and changing it and molding it and filtering it and sorting it and delivering it to you in a way you can get your head around. That's what Collaborate's doing. That's the magic of what they're doing. And most clients I see looking at Collaborate go, that's what I meant. That's what I wanted. I didn't want those funky Archimate diagrams or UML diagrams. I don't know what all that's about. I want that stuff. I want these big diagrams that give me ideas about what's happening in my business. So that's where most people want to be. So I've just got a question come in here, which I'll just read. Based on your experience, do you think delivering valuable model is easier in a business domain than technical? Ooh. So the question says, based on your experience, do you think delivering valuable model is easier in a business domain for management than a technical one? I don't know. I don't think I do really. I wouldn't differentiate between a business deliverable and a technical one. Most of the stuff you do in Enterprise Architect that we're talking about here is in a business kind of world, not a techie one. Business people I've generally found to be a bit more understanding than techie people who think they know better. So I would generally go for a business deliverable, partly because it's easier and partly because it adds more value very often. So I don't know if that answers the question. If not, come back to me later on. So back to delivery then. So we've decided what kind of thing we're trying to deliver, and it may be definite. Even if it's a definite document today, Collaborate may still be the answer as how to deliver it. It may be a spreadsheet or a Word document still. Benefit of that is this is what they normally get. Because Collaborate, fantastic as it is, may be a bit of a change for some people. Like, oh, I normally get a spreadsheet with all the requirements in it, and now you're giving me some kind of funky view like this, which may be objectively better, but it's not what I was expecting. So if you want to have an easy life in terms of fitting in better with what else your business is doing, it may be better to start off with by saying, hey, look, you used to get a spreadsheet, I'll give you a spreadsheet. Okay, the spreadsheets come out of Enterprise Architect, but I'll just to make life easier. If they say, by the way, they want things in PowerPoint and Visio, don't talk to them anymore because they're obviously bad people. So just say, yeah, you can have access to a model because that's just better. But Word and Excel, yeah, okay, it's a pain, but there are lots of ways of giving them good documentation out of your model in that format to give them the interaction and the delivery that they need. You can either use the native functions in EA, which will produce you both Word and Excel. There's the Office integration add-in, which does a bit more stuff. And then there's EA Docs, obviously declaring an interest. I'm the author of EA Docs, which does all of it much, much better. But I would say that, wouldn't I? But don't let the tooling get in the way too much. Concentrate on, if you want an Excel and a Word document, right, okay, what does that need to contain? What are the fields? And then go and choose a tool that delivers that. Don't put the tool in ahead of the deliverable. Kind of an option that's kind of not on this scale somewhere, so I kind of put it somewhere else, is they may want it delivering to some other format. So a Jira or Confluence or a SharePoint or lots of other tools. And the answer there may be to say, we'll actually use Collaborate in between your Sparks model and those tools and sort of move it through Collaborate to do that, because Collaborate's got all these kind of funky interfaces that let you talk to all these different web-based tools. Because once you've got out of the desktop, 1990s kind of world of Sparks into the web world of Collaborate, then talking to these tools is much, much easier. So that may be another delivery mechanism you might think of, that rather than saying, here's a spreadsheet in a document, here's the same information delivered to a web, more web kind of tool. What are we going to do then in this delivery stage? And this is, as I said before, highly iterative. Do a bit, deliver a bit, think a bit. So I would suggest that you start with figure out what the delivery needs to look like. It's a document, it's got the following bits and pieces in it. Fantastic. Go away and invent some content that looks like that. Even if it's just dragged and dropped out of the project browser called requirement 1, use case 1, business function 1, don't even bother giving them a name. Don't even try and do the modeling. Get that some rubbishy content, but in the right structure with the right tag values and the right connectors, and then try and create that deliverable. Try and export the spreadsheet. Try and create the document. Try and, if you are at that stage, send it to Collaborate and say, oh, that wasn't quite what I thought. So the user population will tell you, the consumers rather, will tell you what it is that they need. So get that feedback. And don't be surprised if that first feedback is bad. That means you're doing a good thing. This is completely, seems crazy, but it's true. The worst feedback you ever get is none. That says you're probably wasting your time and they don't know what you're talking about. The best feedback is where they go, ah, yeah, you've got this totally wrong. You should have done it like this. In which case, get your pen out and write it down and go round again. Yeah, I've got examples going back 20 years of organizations where their first feedback was bad and they got all gloomy and despondent and we're not doing it very well. Well, they were. They just didn't get it right first time. Fantastic. Go around again and again and again until eventually you're absolutely certain as to what the information is in your model when you start to put the real content in, and you know right away, as soon as you've got the first proper set of requirements or the first proper set of business functions, you can immediately create an output document or a spreadsheet or a Collaborate dashboard that shows that data on day one. Yeah. The big mistake here is to say, no, we'll get the delivery and we'll create the content and then we'll get some more and then we'll create some more content and we'll go back and forth over here. And then at the very end of the project, we'll say, oh, right, it's delivery time on Tuesday. Let's produce the document, or let's put Collaborate on top and pull the information out and see if it's okay. It's too late. Your model's already gone wrong. You've gone off in one direction from what your consumers want in a different direction, and it's all too late. So even if your first Collaborate dashboard or your first document or spreadsheet just has requirement number 1, requirement number 2, talks to stakeholder A with priority 1, doesn't matter. At least you've proven you can model stuff and deliver it. Yeah, it's a bit like, trying to launch a rocket to say, well, we'll concentrate completely on the capsule at the top and forget the rocket underneath it and make a capsule that's just all wrong, that can't ever be put into space. I mean, it would just be mad. You'd think those people were idiots. People do it all the time in the EA world. They get so lost in the modeling bit, they forget to create the deliverable as they're going along. Because apart from anything else, your users will look at those deliverables and go, okay, well, it's not quite what I was expecting because all the requirements are called requirement number 1 and 2. But at least it looks nice. Good. And we have a mechanism where we can press the button and do it. So that's all good. So tools, techniques, Collaborate. I'm a huge fan. Been a fan since the first time I ever saw it. The big drawback, and there is one, sorry Collaborate team, it needs web servers and repository access and single sign-on and firewall changes and all that stuff. So from a technology point of view, it's painful, but it's worth the pain. You're going to have to do this at some point, because if you want to give your consumers this kind of information, there is only one way to do it, and that's in Collaborate. The alternative, by the way, is rather than you do all that stuff, get somebody else to do it. So do a Sparks in the cloud. So that's the only drawback of Collaborate. There is more work to do, though, to make it work. You do have to think what goes into those dashboards and what's the best way of doing it, and does it look nice, and tailor the dashboards to the individual types of users. So it's not no work. You don't plug it in and yay, it's all fantastic. But it's the same thought process you did when you create the document, which is who's going to read it, what detail do they need. So it's all the same stuff. But Collaborate's brilliant at doing things like hiding the complexity in your model and only showing each group of consumers what they need to see, just like you'd do with redesigning a document. And you probably want to put more diagrams in there, which only Collaborate will use. But hey, it's a fantastic story. Do it. If you're not doing it, you're missing out. So this is my kind of summary. Before we set, just one more slide then before the break on what my project actually did. So understand what the tools can do. Understand what you need to make Collaborate work, what you need to generate documents and spreadsheets. Keep it simple. I would strongly advise you don't try and change your project process to fit your tools. You should be fitting into the process already there. Once you can deliver good and interesting stuff, then think about changing the process. But you'll be doing that with the business encouraging you to do that. And if we have time later on, I'll talk about don't change the model to suit one customer. It's a universal one. So what did we decide to do? We made an architecture impact document. We had to do a bucket load more modeling because that was the kind of shape of the model that the team had produced to start with. So lots and lots of the purple layer stuff and not much further down. What was actually needed was a lot more in the that's the business layer, a load more in the application layer, and lower layers as well. So it was actually a lot more complicated than we thought, but doable. It was done. A lot of technical information was needed that we just didn't have and didn't master, so we had to go back and harvest some of that information, and we'll talk about harvesting in a second. And it was fine, really. That worked pretty well. We could create a document for every project. We all had it all in one model, and we were then beginning at this point to populate this model with stuff that the CTO was going to be interested in. As each project came along, it added more and more detail, and we were pulling more and more detail in, and gradually it became more useful. So that's where we're going to go next. We're going to look at now, we've figured out what we're going to deliver, we've figured out how we're going to deliver it. I'm next going to look at engaging and modeling in more detail,